Welcome back to BobkeTV time once again for the Broom Wagon, and a massive show we have for you this week. Dauphine, Philly Classic, Contador, Froome back in action. Also Musette Musings, Tweet of the Week, Megan Garnier on the top of the world rankings. All of that and more on the Broom Wagon. Okay, everybody, let's get right back into it with the good, the bad, and the ugly from the week's racing. Let's start with the Spanish. The good to great, a great weekend of racing for the Spanish. In the Tour of Korea, John Aberasturi gets the win. Over in the Tour of Japan is Oscar Pujols. The Philly Classic, Eduard Prades gets the win for Caja Rural. And a huge demonstration of Alberto Contador's gifts as a cyclist in the Dauphine prologue. 4+ clicks straight uphill, and Contador dismantling the field. 6 seconds ahead of Richie Porte, which is also good. I'll get to that in a second. And a full 13 seconds ahead of Chris Froome. A great demonstration of what Alberto Contador does best, and that's time trial and climb. If he keeps this form up, he is going to be a formidable opponent for the Tour de France for anybody else that wants to win the yellow jersey. Contador has had a great season so far with regular wins throughout the year up to this point, and dominating performance in the opening prologue, time trial, hill climb of the Dauphiné. And it would not surprise me one bit if Alberto Contador goes on to win the Dauphiné and win the Tour de France a little bit later on this summer. Also the good, Richie Porte, wow, second, best of the rest. Just a few seconds behind Alberto Contador and 7 seconds ahead of his former team captain at the BMC squad, Chris Froome. So that's got to be very satisfying for Richie Porte. See if he can keep the good racing going for the rest of the Dauphiné and reestablish himself really as one of the favorites for the Tour de France and one of the preeminent stage racers in professional cycling. He's had a very slow build-up of the season, but Richie Porte seems to be on the right track for the Tour de France that starts in just a few weeks' time. All right, also the good, Megan Garnier. Oh my God, she just keeps winning and winning and winning. Last weekend, National Road Race Championships. Week later, Philly Classic. And this was a real crushing demonstration of how well she's racing at the moment, ahead of a top flight field, the best teams in the world and the best women's racers in the world, all at the Philly Classic, and a very tough course for the women. And it sets Megan Garnier as one of the pre-race favorites for this year's road race at the Olympics in Rio. The Rio Olympic game road race course is very, very tough. And Megan Garnier, against the best in the world, has proven that she's as good, if not better, than anybody. So one of the pre-race favorites now for an Olympic gold in the road race in Rio. All right, got to get to the bad. From the prologue in the Dauphiné, Fabio Aru bleeding out a minute 8 to Alberto Contador. And Fabio Aru, the whole Astana team, is working for Aru at this year's Tour de France. And this is a step in the wrong direction. 108. How do you give 108 to Alberto Contador? Are you going to get that back? You don't think he's going to forget about you. You guys went toe-to-toe in last year's Giro d'Italia. And Alberto Contador won that Giro race. Fabio Aru was second. Aru went on to win the Vuelta last year. And the whole Astana team will be working for Aru in this year's Tour de France. And this is not a good indication that he's up to the task. Maybe, just maybe, feeling the pressure of being one of the pre-race favorites for the Tour de France. Not an easy task. Fabio Aru, still a young pro, got lots of development to do. But the Dauphiné not starting out very well. Thibaut Pinot. Hill climb, time trial, which Pinot has improved dramatically on this year so far, 52 seconds behind Contador. So why give up a minute to Contador? Sometimes if the legs aren't there, you can't do anything about it. But I expected Thibaut Pinot to be a lot more competitive in this event. See if he can bounce back from that in the rest of the stages of this year's Dauphine. Okay, more bad. Froome, barely avoiding disaster. Take a look at this little clip here of Froome, way too close to the front, inside the 3K banner. Now, the 3K rule is that if there's any mishaps, you don't lose any time. That's the 3K rule. And once you get under that, guess what time it is? And Chris Froome should know this. Time to pull the plug, float to the back, and let the sprinters do their thing, which we're going to see in a second was very, very dangerous. Nothing happened, but he bounced off a couple of riders and almost went down. So let's hope that Froome, for the rest of the Dauphiné, can stay out of danger. He could have seriously put a damper on his Dauphiné and his Tour de France later. You got to stay off of the tarmac if you want to win the big races. So Froome, what are you doing up there, man? Be afraid. But we'll see. I'm sure that he will have a talking to from the team, and they will remind him that once you're in 3Ks, and not just Froome, but all of his teammates too, start filtering to the back and be safe. Get to the finish line so you can fight again the next day. All right, the ugly. This is the slow motion frustration of Chris Horner when the bike detonates within sight of the finish line. Take a look at this. Okay, it seemed like, I'm not sure because it's kind of hard to tell, but oftentimes it's easy to lose the chain when you're shifting from the big ring to the small ring. It happens to everybody all the time. So don't think it's a fault of the bike. Don't think it's a fault of the mechanic. Don't think it's a fault of the setup. I think it's pilot error, and maybe that's why Chris Horner was so frustrated and hit the inevitable throwing of the bike and slow motion kicking of the water bottle. I've been there. I've been there more times than I care to admit. And it is, especially if you're feeling good and the whole package together, sprinting for the win at this point, and you're right in there and even looking for a great placing, and maybe even the win for Chris Horner at the top of a hill. Why not? So I feel your pain, Chris. Hopefully your bike stays together for the rest of the summer and you get some good results and some big wins that I'm sure Chris Horner is capable of. All right. Next up, the Musette Musings. All right, let's start the Musette Musings off with one of my favorite characters to follow. Oleg Tinkoff. Now, if you thought Oleg Tinkoff would just bow quietly out of the sport, maybe you hoped he would, wishful thinking. He's taken to the Twitter sphere to tweet out this: BMC and Katusha, two of the strongest teams on the planet, out of cycling in the near future, is his prediction. That's not going to happen. Katusha, they're in it for the long haul. This is the Russian cycling project. So in one form or another, the team run by that organization is going to be around for a long time. Same with BMC. Great team, great roster, long-term commitments from the sponsors. So Oleg Tinkoff will be sponsoring other types of sports, and I'm sure he'll have plenty of things to say about those in the future. But I don't think BMC and Katusha are too worried about that. No response from those teams yet. Also this from Oleg: French TV cut off showing Alberto Contador's sponsorship of Tinkoff. They did not show the jersey in the interviews. I promise you, this is not an agenda that anybody has to not show the team that the riders race for. It's I mean, the Tinkoff brand on the shoulders of Peter Sagan and Alberto Contador this year alone, to get that kind of publicity is worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's not enough for Tinkoff, but I'm pretty sure it's not the sport's fault. And if Tinkoff maybe would commit for a few more years, those relationships would be smoother, and that is a figment of Mr. Tinkoff's imagination. That's wildly implausible. Okay. Wow. Stage 1 of the Dauphine, the head-butt battle of the century. You can take a look at round number 1. Ding! Katusha and Cofidis going at it. Very dangerous, by the way, all kidding aside. Ding! Round 2. Wow. What in the heck? You know, you get that wrong by a tiny little bit, and everybody behind you pays. You go down, but just think of the pile-up. Round 3. Ding! Wow. I'll tell you what's disturbing. No one relegated. Nobody. And what's going to happen if they don't relegate riders for doing this is an escalation of the hostilities, an escalation of the aggressive riding. And can you imagine what's going to happen in the Tour de France when Cavendish is there, when Greipel is there, when Kittel is there, Bouhanni. I mean, the list of fast sprinters, Christoph, goes on and on and on. And if all those teams are trying to improve their position by headbutting each other, it's going to be even more mayhem than it already is. And it's already insane. So the officials have to disqualify the riders that do that the whole season, not just the first week of the Tour de France. We'll see how that plays out. But please, I'd like you all to let me know what you think about this. Is that just a part of racing? If you're not swapping paint, you're not trying, that type of thing. Let me know what you guys think. I would be very interested to hear. Alrighty. Team Sky recently saying Nicolas Portal, Chris Froome, and Geraint Thomas will be protected riders at the Tour de France. I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. That's a good way to lose the Tour. That is a good way for neither one of the riders to be able to win. All of the resources have to go into protecting one sole leader. That's the way to win the Tour de France. To do the miles before the mountains and every stage leading up to the mountains to keep your team leader out of trouble. If Geraint Thomas does not have to expend any energy doing that, which we saw a little bit of last year, I mean, he can float around the top 5, top 10 throughout the opening stages in the mountains. But when it's crunch time and you have to do the work for your leader, Geraint Thomas might be the only man standing along with Chris Froome. And I would be very surprised if that actually turns out to be the case. I'm pretty sure Geraint Thomas will be working for Chris Froome during this year's Tour de France. No word from Dave Brailsford if that's true or not, but stay tuned. All right, next up, Tweet of the Week. Got a beef this time. Okay, everybody, tweet beef of the week this time. Tony Martin, taken to the Twitter sphere, thought that the prologue that was 4+ kilometers straight up into the stratosphere, close to 20% in gradient at times, by the way, just wasn't fair. Didn't like it. But I'll tell you this, the climbers don't like a flat prologue where they lose 30 seconds plus to Tony Martin, Fabian Cancellara, and Tom Dumoulin, amongst others. Rowan Dennis, name your time trialing specialist. So I like the uphill time trial format. I think it's fantastic. It's a different type of effort. It's not explosive attacks and then recuperation until the strongest man is standing. It's a slow, painful, grisly burn all the way to the finish line. Contador was the best in the opening prologue of this year's Dauphiné, but I thought it was a really good stage and a little bit different, something for the fans to appreciate besides a flat-out sprint, flat prologue. Tom Dumoulin disagreeing with Tony Martin, saying it was a lovely spectacle. He's glad he did it, and we all can't have a flat prologue every single bike race. All right, everybody. Thanks for your subscriptions. They're coming in at a regular rate, and I really appreciate that. Thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think. flat or uphill prologues? What would you like to see? Thank you for all the comments, and please follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks a lot, everybody. Until next time, tout à l'heure. Bike path, man commuting to work on his bike, jogger a little bit up the path, cyclist coming towards the jogger, little bit of clouds on the horizon, but beautiful looking bike path. There's the jogger, starting to come around. Look out. Oh my God.